All right, we're live again here at Buffalo Trace Distillery for another episode of Whiskey Wednesday, and we have special guest Preston Van Winkle. Preston, how you doing?
Doing great. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, it's great. We're excited that you're here, and looks like we got some beautiful bottles here to talk about. If you could just start us off, introduce yourself, and let's talk about the brand.
Yeah, I'm Preston Van Winkle, fourth generation member of the Van Winkle family to get into the whiskey business. Started with my great-grandfather, Pappy Van Winkle. He was a salesman for the Weller Company originally. He eventually bought the Weller Wholesale Company with a fellow salesman, and they eventually bought the Untitled Distillery as well that was producing the whiskey for them back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And operated those two businesses independently of one another for about 18 years until Prohibition began in 1919. When Prohibition began, it effectively ended the Weller Wholesale Company, as there wasn't really a need for wholesale during Prohibition, at least legal wholesale. But the Untitled Distillery was one of the few, along with Buffalo Trace and a couple others, distilleries that was able to produce medicinal whiskey under a special license from the federal government. So they were able to do that during Prohibition. So when it ended in 1933, Pappy and his partners were sitting on top of some aged stock, whereas most startup distilleries at that point were having to start from scratch. So they were able to sell 8, 10, 12, 15-year-old product as well as younger stuff. But they immediately started building the modern-day Stitzelweller distillery, which is still located in Shively, which is a southwest suburb of Louisville. They opened that distillery on Derby Day 1935 through a big party with mint juleps and a lot of whiskey. Pappy operated that distillery until his death in 1965. Bourbon and cigars finally caught up to him at the age of 91. At that point, my grandfather took over. The whiskey business was in a steep decline. Gin, vodka, rum, scotch had all made their mark on the bourbon business. So my grandfather was forced to sell it in 1972. At that point, he resurrected the old Rip Van Winkle label. Got an older bottling here. The old Rip Van Winkle label, which was a pre-Prohibition brand that he had purchased from a friend during the 40s or 50s or so. So he resurrected that label with some stocks that they had made at Stitzelweller, and he began selling that until his death in 1981. My father had joined him in 77. So 81, my grandfather passes away. My dad takes over, started doing the bottling himself, mostly buying stocks from Stitzelweller, our old distillery, and a few others. As well, bulk whiskey was actually available back then. Bulk whiskey was widely available back then. It's hard to come by now, but so that was kind of the situation until 2002 when we partnered up with Buffalo Trace, and now everything from grain to bottle is done here at BT, and as I've said many times in the past, no Van Winkle has ever been a master distiller. We've always had the good sense to partner up with or pay the best in the business to do it. So we're fortunate to have the relationship with Harlan Wheatley, who's making the finest American whiskeys out there right now. So we've been with BT since 2002. It's been an outstanding relationship. Everything in our 10, 12, and 15-year-old bottles at this point is BT distillate. And so in the next few years, the 20 and 23 year will be as well. So we're excited about the future in that regard. That's not just the shameless plug, it's the honest to goodness truth. So we're excited about that. But I started working for my dad in 2001, so I got to do the warehouse management, bottling, processing, all that stuff for a couple years before we partnered with BT. So the business has changed considerably since I started. I like to joke that I was selling whiskey older than I was when I first started working for my father.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I was going to ask you, any of those personal memories too, growing up, and your dad working in it and things like that. So
yeah.
What was it like? What was it like?
I don't know anything different. My dad never knew anything different. His dad never knew anything different. So it was fun. I remember going to help my dad on the bottling line. Mostly just running around, playing in the creek behind the bottling hall, and sliding down box chutes, and driving the little motorized hand truck forklift thing, riding it like a go-kart instead of using it as intended. Mm-hmm. Stuff that OSHA probably would have an issue with these days.
Yeah, that's really great. We do have a lot of questions. We're already getting people asking us, please answer some questions, things like that. But one of the questions is, your dad was supposed to be here today with you. It was supposed to be both of you.
Yeah. So out of an abundance of caution, he had dinner on Sunday night with someone who thinks she may have been exposed to someone who thinks she may have been exposed to COVID.
Sure.
So until test results come back from the third person down the line that I just mentioned, he's self-quarantining. So
yeah, no, that makes sense. I think it's the right thing to do. Even if there's, somebody that you might be around, it's good, especially here at the distillery. You don't want to come on the grounds if you think you've been exposed.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
that's great. So that was kind of the first question we had.
Understandable.
A couple things. I think there's a lot of great questions here, Preston. But Nate Willis on Facebook on Buffalo Trace, he does say, this is good. It's a good question. In carrying on the Van Winkle name, what do you see as your legacy? What are your hopes for the next generation of Van Winkles in terms of involvement with Buffalo Trace and great bourbon?
Yeah, so
that's a big question.
That is, yeah.
I hit you with one of the big ones right
very
away.
Deep and philosophical.
Yeah.
I look at so people always ask me, what do you think your heritage is going to be? Well, my heritage is what I've inherited. My legacy is what I build on top of that. So I hope that my legacy is to have continued on what my father, grandfather, and great-grandfather have done, and hopefully expand on it with the help of Harlan and whomever succeeds him. I hope Harlan does not retire anytime soon. I hope you're listening, Harlan. But I just hope to continue on, obviously making more whiskey and continuing to make it at a the highest level possible.
Sure.
Sure. Growing up, I didn't intend to get into this business, but I got sucked in because it is such an amazing business, and it's such a cool business to be in. The people you get to meet, the stories that are cultivated out of just being in the whiskey as a category business, it's so fun. I can't imagine doing anything else at this point. I tried really hard not to, but I just hope to carry on the tradition and build on it. Hopefully leave something for my son or daughter or my nieces and nephews to step in and continue on with it. I just don't want to be the one to muck it up.
Yeah, that's a good goal.
4 generations in, I don't want to be the one to mess up.
I love it. That's a great
There
goal.
aren't many 4th generation family businesses out there.
It's true. They're rare. They get more rare and rare.
It's rare to go beyond 2.
Yep.
The 3rd generation's usually the one to mess it up, and Julian's done a pretty good job of not messing it up.
Sure. Well, we've got a couple things we want to taste and everything. I'll throw a few more questions in here just because they're coming in hot and heavy. We knew it would be. It's a popular brand. It's obviously some of the best whiskey in the world. I'm gonna group a lot of questions together here.
Okay.
And there's a lot of questions on pricing. And so, can we clear some air, or just discuss
absolutely
about the brand enforcing it or the distillery enforcing it? Can you just talk about pricing just a little bit?
Yeah, so I'll just start at our level. So we price everything at a certain price that if the wholesaler and the subsequent retailer take traditional markups, it ends up on the shelf at or relatively close to our suggested retail. We take into account various state taxes, county taxes. Obviously, if you're in New York City, you're going to pay more because New York City rent is a lot more expensive than Kentucky rent. So once the truck with our products pulls away from our warehouse, it is entirely out of our control. From there, it is up to the wholesaler to determine which bars, restaurants, and liquor stores get product. We can suggest all we want, but at the end of the day, it's up to them to determine which bars, restaurants, and liquor stores get product. From there, it's up to the retailer to determine their shelf price. It's actually against the law for us or the wholesaler to enforce any sort of retail pricing structure. There are federal and state penalties for trying to enforce those shelf prices. Do we hope that the retailers price at or near suggested retail? Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Do we discourage them from doing anything differently? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, we can't control it, unfortunately, much to our chagrin. We can't, by some state and some federal laws, direct sell to consumers the way wine and wineries and beer producers, craft beer producers can. That could shift due to new strategies and laws regarding retail as a result of COVID, but from an infrastructure standpoint, it'll be a long time before those changes could or would take place.
Well, that's currently how allocation works, right? I mean, that's when we talk about allocation.
So we allocate at the state level. We say, okay, here, Tennessee, here's what you're getting. Kentucky, here's what you're getting. Minnesota, here's what you're getting. And from there, it's up to the wholesaler to divvy it up, bars, restaurants, liquor stores. So we can determine how much product ends up in each market, but from there, it's up to the wholesaler to determine where it goes and whatnot. So we essentially lose control over it, the ability to track it as soon as it leaves our warehouse, which is frustrating as all get out, but it's just the nature of the way laws in this country work. So
yeah, three-tier system.
Three-tier system.
We have to be a part of that.
It's a holdover from 1933, Prohibition.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. And again, I know the folks on here have a lot of questions, but a lot of them do. They're talking about pricing and allocations. So I think it's good to sort of clear that up, and maybe we can move on to some other things. There's a lot of other great questions. There's some other good places to try the products too. Bars.
Yeah, a lot. Try it before you buy it. A lot of the correspondence I get from consumers is, "Oh, I just heard about your product. Where can I find it? Or I'd love to try it. Can you send me a sample?" Well, no, I can't send you a sample because, again, that's against the law too, unfortunately. But there are a lot of great bars and restaurants that'll sell you, a drink of it for a reasonable price. Here in Kentucky, we have the Urban Bourbon Trail that's just loaded with bars and restaurants that, in order to be on the trail, you have to stock a certain number of products, bourbon products, and it's a great way to try it before you buy it, or if you can't find it on the liquor store shelves. It's a great way to get a drink of it without having to buy an entire bottle.
Well, I think that Jim King a few minutes ago on Facebook says, "I've never had a taste that is going to change this year due to my friend getting a bottle."
There you go.
So that, it's good to have friends with bottles too.
Yeah.
We can move on. Maybe we'll start the tasting. Maybe walk us through the.
This is what I refer to as liquid family history. So we're not going to be cracking that bottle open. I don't know where this bottle came from. I guess the archive that we have here at BT. But so I'm not going to crack that one open. But we're going to do the 12 and 15, kind of the middle section of our portfolio. The 12-year-old is our second youngest, but at 12 years old, it's relatively old for a bourbon. Got that right here. The thing I love about this is one my father refers to as nectar. It's just so light, clean, and crisp. It's got sweetness, but not candy sweetness. It's you get the caramel and vanilla notes. It's been in the barrel just long enough with our wheated recipe. Corn, wheat, and barley, as opposed to the more common corn, rye, and barley recipe. You get the lighter, toastier notes from the barrel. You don't pick up the heavy tannins from the barrel, the heavy, bitter, woody qualities from the barrel that you would from a bourbon made with corn, rye, and barley nearly as quickly. So you just get the slightest hint of oak on this one, but mostly you're getting the grain and the caramel and vanilla notes from the barrel. It's 90.4 proof. This is one that I would drink maybe with an ice cube before dinner typically. If there were a worldwide abundance of this would be my tailgate bourbon.
Probably get a few questions about that as a tailgate bourbon. I'm looking forward to them. I'm gonna keep looking right now.
I drink more Buffalo Trace than anything else because any bottle. People ask me all the time, how many bottles of your own bourbon do you have in your liquor cabinet? And the answer right now is 1.5. The half is one that I will ultimately drink. The other one will be a gift for someone during the holiday season. So won't be drinking that one. But any bottle that I have is a bottle that a consumer is not going to have access to. So I feel extremely guilty hanging on to anything. I can't just walk into the warehouse and grab bottles willy-nilly. Taxes have to be paid. I don't have unlimited access to it. I do have a little bit better access than the average Joe via a liquor store. I still have to go to a liquor store and buy it. So that's another reason I don't have a lot of it in my own liquor cabinet. So I drink more Buffalo Trace than anything.
Yeah, and I think that
and Weller when I can find it, but that's getting harder and harder to come by. But yeah, this one is just so light, clean, and crisp. I'd put this up against any whiskey on the planet, not just bourbon, any whiskey on the planet in terms of overall drinkability. It's just so approachable. It's delicate, but not thin.
Well, you mentioned Weller, and you mentioned some taste profile, and we do have a lot of questions about the wheated recipe here at Buffalo Trace. And I'm just grouping questions together, but we do have a lot sort of the same. And people mention Weller, they mention the wheated recipe. Maybe talk a little bit about the recipe there, and maybe.
So the wheated recipe is one that the Weller family kind of latched on to long before Pappy got his first job right out of college as a Weller salesman. He didn't grow up dreaming of being a whiskey salesman. He was the son of an attorney in Danville, Kentucky. Grew up in a small town, the son of a small town attorney, and he got out of college and needed a job, so he moved to Louisville and started looking, and Weller was hiring. Weller was really the first to make a point of selling wheated bourbons. And the difference originally was wheated bourbons are more palatable at a younger age than, say, a bourbon made with rye as the second grain. What they didn't realize early on was that you can age wheated bourbons much further without getting the negative impact from the barrel. So the Wellers weren't really good at selling that concept of wheated bourbon versus the more common bourbon made with rye as the second grain. That's where Pappy kind of made his name, was propagating this idea of the wheated difference. He used to do little advertisements in the form of these strip articles that would appear on a page in Time magazine, Sports Illustrated, Playboy, back when there were good articles. Mm-hmm. But he kind of made the wheated difference a real thing. Mm-hmm. And obviously our family has latched onto that pretty significantly. So as far as the Weller versus Van Winkle thing now, there's no Weller marketed as anything older than 12 years old. And then, so you have the 12-year-old Van Winkle and then the 12-year-old Weller, and people ask, well, what's the difference? The difference is that by we, I mean my father and I, have the first crack at the barrels from the best parts of the best warehouses for the flavor profile that we're trying to hit. Those little pockets within those warehouses have been identified over decades and decades here at BT by a guy named Ronnie Edens, who was the warehouse manager for decades and decades. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we lost him a few years ago, but now a fellow named Patrick Klaus is doing that.
I think that's a big misconception too, that just because the years are the same, people assume they taste the same. But there's so much variance in the warehouse.
Yeah, the warehouse makes a tremendous difference.
A tremendous difference from barrel to barrel, floor to floor, warehouse to warehouse. So you are essentially curating what that tastes like. That's why it's so different.
Yeah, that's kind of the point.
Yeah.
So a lot of people probably wouldn't notice the difference between the 12-year-old Weller and the 12-year-old Van Winkle, but the people that have experienced both of them, to a significant degree, might, and that's the idea. Mm-hmm.
Well, we've got, as we assumed, lots of questions, but so we have our first tailgate comment here. Jeffrey McMillan says, "Please come to my tailgate." So there you
again,
go.
If I had an abundance of this stuff,
exactly.
That would be my tailgate whiskey.
Yeah, exactly. I assumed we would get a few comments.
I fall back on my go-to BT.
There you go.
If we could tailgate right now.
Yeah, I know. It's lots of
changes.
Lots of changes. Yeah. Matt Rudin, sorry if I mispronounced your name on Facebook here, does say, do you sell any of the used or retired barrels?
So as part of our partnership with Buffalo Trace, once the whiskey is dumped out of the barrel, they own the barrels. And they have contracts with barrel brokers, several big ones around the country. So all of the barrels, not all, most of the barrels go to these brokers, and they're scrubbed of any. There's no mention of Van Winkle on any barrel, so if you see anything barrel aged that isn't this stuff, claiming to have been aged in a Van Winkle barrel, one, they're abusing intellectual property rights, and two, they can't make that claim or substantiate that claim because there's nothing on any barrel that says Van Winkle. Most of the barrels go to barrel brokers, and then they're sent to Scotland for Scotch, Mexico for tequila, the Caribbean for rum. Some are sold to breweries. And then the very few that we don't sell to barrel brokers are used by my sisters, who have started about 6 years ago, maybe, a company called Pappy and Company. They do the dry goods stuff, hats, T-shirts, barrel wood furniture, and barrel wood cufflinks or decorative bowls, stuff like that. So they use them for some really cool projects. And then occasionally, like we did a few years ago with the decanter set we used the wood for the lids to a decorative box for the decanter. So we use them for different projects like that. And then some of them are held back for BT has so many experimental barrels in warehouses right now, like thousands of different experiments. So some of them are used for those as well. But we don't sell them to the general public. We used to. It just got to be too much of a headache selling a few barrels here, a few there. It was easier just to load 100 of them on a truck and send them to a broker and let them deal with it.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a really nice comment here. This is pretty nice. It says, Todd Van Orman says, "Sir, how does it feel that some folks reserve your bourbons for the special events in their own lives?"
It's humbling.
That's pretty cool. I never thought. That's pretty nice.
A lot of the consumer inquiries we get are to the effect that I'd like to buy a bottle as a gift for so and so for such and such an event, and it's humbling to have that be their thought as to when and why to use our products. I hate to see stuff sitting on shelves or bunkered, so to speak, for years and years and years without, we're not making this stuff for somebody else to turn a massive profit on it or for it to be, hidden away for decades. We want people to drink it and enjoy it with friends and family. So if somebody gains a little, added enjoyment from an event as a result of our products, that's wonderful and it's humbling and it's great to hear. Yeah.
We talk about the expansion here at the distillery quite a bit.
Yeah.
And we know, and in past episodes of Whiskey Wednesdays, Harlan and folks talk about we're going to make more of every brand under this distillery umbrella, and I assume that's the same for these products.
We are making more and more. We're not blowing the roof off the still house, so to speak, but we are making more and more. We've got more 10 and 15 or 10 and 12-year-old than we've ever had in the past. That will translate to the 15-year-old here, I think, next year, and then obviously 5 and 8 years down the road. It'll translate to the 20 and 23 as well. So we're making more and more. We don't intend to entirely close the gap between supply and demand, because you do run the risk of overproducing, and this whole bourbon boom could go bust at any minute. I don't see it happening, but it could. We don't want to be in a position where we're sitting on top of a lake of whiskey we can't sell. We've been in that position, and it was in 1972 when my family was forced to sell our old distillery. So we don't ever want to be in that position again. But we recognize that there is a tremendous amount of demand globally. We're not exporting. I think we're exporting maybe 1.5% of our total volume, and our exports are being held almost at a constant, not as a percentage, but as a constant number of cases. So any additional volume we have from year to year, we're dumping into the U.S. market. If the U.S. market decides, hey, we don't like bourbon anymore, there's a lot of untapped potential outside the U.S., but any extra cases we've got from year to year, we're keeping them in the U.S. I heard which reminds me of a funny phone call I got from a consumer in Texas. He said that he walked into a major liquor store chain, and the person working there told him they didn't get any that year because we cut the Texas allocation entirely and sold it all in China.
It's just not true.
Which wasn't true. Yeah, Texas gets one of the larger allocations. Mm-hmm. It's a big bourbon state. Mm-hmm. It's a big state in general.
Sure. Sure.
So, the guy, rather than just say, I don't know, he made up something. We haven't sold a drop in Asia since probably the late 90s. And it's not because we have something against Asia. It's just, why, if you can't buy it in Kentucky, why should you be able to find it in Tokyo or Shanghai or Rio, for that matter, or
sure,
Moscow?
Yeah, sure. No, I think that's music to a lot of folks' ears, and I'm glad you brought that up. I've kept you for a while here. Normally we cut these off at 20 minutes or so. We're at 32 minutes, but
okay.
Heck, I enjoy it. We've got just really great questions. So if you're okay, I've just got a few more, and we'll wrap it up. But let's dive into 15 here. Yeah, so, that's my fault.
15-year-old Pappy, 107 proof. This is my favorite, my dad's favorite. Largely when we do big tastings at Whiskey Fest or whatever, the overall consensus is this is most people's favorite. It's just perfect combination of age and proof. It's I would refer to it as our most versatile. It's great neat. It's great with an ice cube. If you've got a bottle of it, try throwing an ice cube in, rim the glass with a twist of lemon. The citrus really makes the flavors in this one pop. It's great in a classic cocktail like an old fashioned. Obviously, most people probably aren't going to be making old fashions with it. But
I'm waiting on the first comment about that.
Yeah, I'm sure there will be some. I've had some, mostly at bars in New York or London. Just because it's, when you ask a good bartender to make you an old fashioned, it's kind of like an old fashioned and a daiquiri are kind of like the gold standard for whether a bartender is any good or not. But it's just I don't know, it's just so well balanced. Even at 107 proof, it's not hot. I like the higher proof stuff. I literally cut my teeth on bourbon. I didn't know that there was such a thing as store-bought cough medicine until I was probably 10 or 12. Cough medicine to me was, in a little glass about that much bourbon, some water, some honey, and stick it in the microwave for about 7-8 seconds, and that was cough medicine.
Wow.
I can remember sitting on the kitchen counter with vicious coughs as a kid, and that's what I got. I don't remember having it rubbed on my gums, but I was told that I did. So
I'm sure you did.
But I like the higher proof stuff. When we discontinued the 10-year-old 90 proof 10, 15 years ago, I can't even remember at this point, we did so because we wanted to eliminate either the 90 proof or the 107 proof. We chose to eliminate the 90 proof because you can always add water. You know, if 107 is too hot for you, too much alcohol for you, you can always add water to get it down closer to 90 or whatever you want to experience.
It allows the consumer some flexibility.
Yeah, you can't add alcohol back to that.
Sure.
And frankly, a bottle of 107 proof goes further. You pour a drink, you can add more water to it. The bottle's going to last longer. But yeah.
No, that's great.
This is just my absolute favorite whiskey product on the planet.
Well, I think a lot of folks agree. You know, I always, we don't have the 23 or the 20 here today, but maybe next time we'll go through those. But
sure.
For me, the 23, the mouthfeel on the 23 is so unique. And I think that's what
it's a different animal.
Yeah, it really stands out to me as the mouthfeel. I think it separates itself from any other whiskey I've ever had. So
yeah, it's a totally different animal. It's that's definitely an after dinner. When I drink that, I'm thinking outside by a fire pit, smoking a cigar, or inside by a fire with the golden retriever curled up at your feet.
Yeah.
I don't have a golden retriever, never have.
But when you drink it, you close your eyes and you have one.
Yeah.
Just because, I'm with you.
Yeah, it's that kind of experience. But it definitely is one of those whiskeys that benefits from having had a nice big meal to fill up your belly.
For sure. So, we're just not going to get to all these questions. I wish we could. We've kept you long enough, man. It's almost 36, 37 minutes here.
If there are more questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, well, there's a few.
I'm in no hurry to
as long as
get back to the office.
Yeah, sure. There's whiskey in front of you. We got a bunch of great people here chiming in. So
yeah. Curious to know what's on people's minds.
Yeah, no, there's a lot. So let's just say, well, here's a good question. Melissa Ledbetter, it's been a few minutes, 10 minutes ago or so, says, what are your thoughts? She says, what is his thoughts? What are his thoughts on the new book, Pappy Land? I can't wait to read it. So I know there's a new book out there, Pappy Land, Story of Family, Fine Bourbon, and the Things That Last. I hope I got that right.
Yeah, sounds right.
So
it's a long title, but yeah.
Yeah, so how's the new book? Has it launched?
Yesterday, actually. Yesterday. It's available anywhere books are sold. But yeah, so it's a great book. It's a quick, easy read. I read it in a day, maybe a day and a quarter. But I was reading it for accuracy and whatnot. So I was essentially.
Did you know how it ended?
Yeah. It ended with 6 months ago.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm fairly familiar with the story.
There you go.
Yeah, so it was written by Wright Thompson, who has become a really good friend. He's a senior writer for ESPN. Traditionally has written about iconic sports figures. He used to write for another sports writer, Bill Simmons' website, The Grantland. He had a podcast as well. But Wright writes about traditionally sports figures. But I read a little blurb that he wrote about Pappy years ago and thought it was well written. So I emailed him and said, "Hey, thanks for the mention." And we started corresponding. He lives in Oxford, Mississippi, which is home to a charity organization called the Southern Foodways Alliance that we're really passionate about. And I was down there for their annual symposium years ago and met him. And we hung out during the course of the weekend and got to know one another. And right before he went on stage and gave the keynote speech, I handed him my flask that actually, I think it had Weller in it. Or no, I think I did fill that one up that night specifically with this guy, with the 15-year-old, because I knew that it was going to be a big special night. But right before he went on stage, he took a big pull off of it. He may have killed it, I can't remember. But we just became fast friends, and I introduced him to my dad, and over the course of several years, several visits to Louisville, hanging out with us, he just thought a book about my father and his story, the story that hasn't really been told. The Pappy story's been told in my Aunt Sally's book, but Always Fine Bourbon has been told. So he thought it was a story worth telling, and over the course of several years of just hanging out, making notes and stuff, the book kind of turned into more of a story about people and relationships and family, and specifically father-son relationships. And Wright was able to draw parallels between his relationship with his father and my father's relationship with his. So it just turned into something more than just a dictation on my dad's life and all the many, many, many misconceptions about our family and whatnot. So the book's great. It's only like 250 pages, and it's a beautifully written. Wright can weave a story like nobody I've ever read. It's a really beautiful book physically, but also it's just really well written, and there's some really cool parallels drawn between his upbringing and my dad's upbringing, and the stuff that my dad went through during the 80s and 90s before things took off, such as my dad finally paying off the loans that he used to keep the family business afloat.
Sure.
Finally paying them off last year.
Yeah. Wow.
So,
well, I can tell you're really proud of that book, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. And I think everybody probably should, to really learn the real story and things like that. So everybody should know you guys had a hand in that, and are proud of it.
Thank you to all the consumers of our products out there. We wouldn't have done it without you. Mm-hmm. And that's why people always say, why don't you raise your prices? Well, we're not in the business of trying to steal people's money. We want it to be accessible to people. So we're hoping that we can shift the tide back the other way, so that retailers don't charge these crazy prices, and most of them don't, but they sell out like that.
Yeah.
They sell out via lotteries, waiting lists, consumer loyalty programs, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Like Kroger here in Kentucky is doing their lottery really soon. Alabama, the statewide lottery ran 2 days ago. So all at very reasonable, if not exactly right on top of our suggested retail price.
I think that happens more than you know. It's just you don't.
The only prices you ever see. Yeah, the only prices you ever see are the drastically inflated ones. If you Google Pappy Van Winkle,
on the shelf.
If you Google Pappy Van Winkle, you're going to get like 15 or 20 retailers across the country that pop up, and they're all over the. There are certain sites that are basically bulletin boards for retailers to post their products. So you may see hundreds of listings, but it's the same 15, 20, 30 retailers over and over and over again. But most of them are selling at or near suggested retail price. You just got to be either on the waiting list, in the lottery, or in their customer loyalty program.
Sure. Well, I'm going to have to cap this. It's almost 45 minutes in. Sometimes we're only at 15 minutes, so I think we've spent enough time and used up enough of your time, Preston. But we'll get back in there and answer some just with text and replies and things if we can. But any closing? I got one quick story of my own. Years ago, I was fortunate enough to have a green glass bottle of Pappy 23 from back in the day,
1998,
and I had a couple of those, and you and your dad signed it. We didn't know each other then or anything, but I think it was here at the distillery, and my label had a real crease in it. It always bugged me, always bugged me. And your dad grabbed it and he was like, well, I definitely hand labeled that one. And so just thinking about all the work and time that he put into, and the vision he had for it, and the rest of the family too. So
I can envision that label going on. I probably know who. Yeah. Who put it? Linda was her name. She did most of the labels.
It had a bad crease in it, but I always thought it was funny.
Those are the old paper glue labels that they didn't go on just perfectly. And by the time somebody manipulated it, stuck it in the bag, it could very well have gotten.
Yep. And it was in 1998, his first run there. But thanks again.
My pleasure.
Any closing statements or anything else you want to chat about? You've given us a lot, so.
I just Thank you for giving me the opportunity, and thank you to all the consumers and fans out there. We are making more, I promise. I don't see it getting a whole lot easier to get our products right away, but we're working on it. Trust me, we're not holding back inventory to falsely inflate demand. That would be a bad business decision. For anybody, but we're making more and more, and thank you for your patience and thank you for your support. We don't do this for our own benefit. We're doing it for you guys. We make products that we're proud of and that we like, and we're just thrilled that other people seem to like them too. So just thanks. Great. Check out pappyco.com. They got some cool stuff. Check out the book. Buy it, don't. But it's a neat story. But just thanks for enjoying our products, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to sit here and do this instead of any number of things I could have gotten stuck doing.
Sure.
Otherwise.
Thank you so much for your time. Again, it's a long one.
It's been fun. It's been a pleasure.
Good. No, I've had a blast too. So, all right. Thanks a lot, Preston.
Yes, sir.